So what have you guys been eating?
Thanks for asking. Despite it being 3 p.m., I've only just had breakfast, but I had some cinnamon raisin toast, and boy, was it fine. Moving on. Jackson, have you eaten anything?
Today I have eaten. I had blueberry pancakes this morning, and then for lunch I had a sandwich.
What was on
Uh,
it?
Oh, that's such a good question.
You don't remember?
I purchased it, so I didn't make it, and it just like had green stuff. So I was like, I'd eat that.
Do you mean like
And I
lettuce?
did. Yeah, that was definitely some of it, and it had like maybe pickles on it. Maybe
You're the one who ate it. I think if anyone should know, it's you.
it was caprese-esque in origin, I'd say.
All right, Parth, let's get this over with.
I had a Spanish omelet. My mommy made me.
Porque. See what I did there?
Wow, you're so multicultural.
Yeah, I got up to Spanish 3.
We just gained 3 listeners in Spain.
Yeah, we're really expanding our audience. Mucho gusto.
Wait, Trent.
See?
When did you eat breakfast?
And I'll stop trying to talk in Spanish. About an hour ago. Why?
That's lunch. That's no longer breakfast.
No. See, Parth, if your first meal of the day, no matter what, is breakfast. Like I wake up at like noon when the remainder of my family is already eating lunch, but it'd be wrong to just wake up and eat like a bologna sandwich. So I start with breakfast food, and then from that point you can have lunch. But you can't just dive straight into the deep end of lunch.
Breakfast food is easily the most overrated.
I would like to cordially disagree. Parth, break the tie.
I would disagree with that.
Oof. I would rather eat dinner for breakfast than breakfast for dinner. You can take that to the
Jackson, that's
Absolutely
blasphemy.
not.
You want to eat like meatloaf at like 9 a.m.?
Well, I would not eat meatloaf ever, but I would eat ravioli anytime.
Are you saying just ravioli, or is that just an example of something that appeals to you?
That's just an example of something that appeals to my very core.
Jackson, I just can't be bothered to hear more of this.
What's your beef? What's your beef with meatloaf? Pun intended.
I mean, I don't know. I've never had meatloaf, so I should not get.
Well, you have, because have you ever heard of meatball? Because a meatball is just it's just like a segment of a meatloaf.
Wait, is that what meatloaf is?
Is that true?
Like a meatloaf is just like a big like pile of meat.
And the whole time I've never actually known what a meatloaf was.
Looks so weird though.
Yeah, it's like any other beef product.
Wait, by this metric, is a burger like a slice of meatloaf? No, you're lying.
Yes, all beef products are just like they're derived from the same place. It just piles of meat in different shapes.
Is cow the same place?
Well, I feel like cow's the origin.
Interesting.
Have we exhausted this topic enough?
Yeah, I'm exhausted.
On to the show.
Welcome to Craft Services, where we talk about the movies. I'm Parth Marathe.
I'm Trent Algare, co-host of Craft Services.
And I'm Jackson Clark.
Friend of Parth Marathe and Trent Algare.
Aforementioned co-hosts.
Each week we discuss a different film and hopefully have an interview with a crew member of that film to talk with us about their experience. This week we've got a special 2-part episode. We were able to get in contact with the production designer and art director for our movie today, Five BLOODS. So I'm going to start off by reading off our IMDb synopsis of the movie.
Parth, tell us the basic plot of the movie in like 2 sentences. How does that sound?
I can tell it to you in 1. 4 African-American vets battle the forces of man and nature when they return to Vietnam, seeking the remains of their fallen squad leader and the gold fortune he helped them hide.
You summed it up well.
Thank you.
Was that in your own words, or was that from imdb.com?
I won't comment, but I will say that it was from IMDb.
Well, that was a comment, but moving on.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Did you guys know prior to watching this about the gold fortune aspect?
Well, I saw the trailer. If
Oh,
that's what you
I
mean.
didn't see the trailer. I didn't know that was gonna happen.
So what were you expecting?
I knew that it was about like retrieving their fallen friends' remains. I didn't know about the gold.
I feel like that's more of a subplot than the gold.
Yeah, truly.
We should get into the production history.
Yeah, Parth, tell us about the production history.
Well, originally this was a script. It was a spec script by Danny Bilson and Paul DeBemio. It was called The Last Tour, and Oliver Stone was supposed to direct. And then after he dropped out in 2016, and Spike Lee and Kevin Wilmot performed a rewrite after they finished their work on BlacKkKlansman and changed it so that it was African Americans in the script. At some point, it was supposed to be Samuel L. Jackson, Giancarlo Esposito, Don Cheadle, and John David Washington in the lead roles, but all of them had conflicting schedules, so they had to pass. So we were left with Chadwick Boseman, Delroy Lindo, and Jonathan Majors, which I feel like I was happy with what we got. So it was had a budget of $35 to $45 million, and we have no idea how much money this would make because this was a movie released on Netflix.
Was that the original plan, or was that improvised due to lack of theaters?
No, that was the original plan. It was going to premiere at the Cannes Film Festival because I'm pretty sure they're trying to go for Oscars with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And for that to happen, you have to have had it in some sort of scheduled theatrical window. So, like, that's what they did with Roma and The Irishman and Marriage Story.
Are they gonna do like online versions of, I don't know, like Cannes and all the other major qualifying film festivals?
Yeah.
I don't know. Are they?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure South by Southwest has already,
Oh, wow.
but I'm not sure about that. Pretty sure.
Yeah, can you buy tickets and they'll just like send you a link? That sounds so dangerous because I would imagine those would get passed around, or someone could just screen record. But can you do like a limited time file that can't be like exploited and copied?
No. I mean, if there's a file, you can find a way to record it.
That's computers 101.
Just after a quick Google search, the South by Southwest movies they had them premiere on Amazon Prime Video at the time of the festival.
Good shout out to Amazon. They really need your small business at times like these.
Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff Bezos says, "No problem, Parth." That was my Jeff Bezos impression,
That
everyone.
was a really good Jeff Bezos impression.
Yeah, it's accurate.
So we were able to secure an interview with the production designer, Wynn Thomas, who's been Spike Lee's longtime production designer, going all the way back to his first movie. And so we're going to cut right to that interview, and then for our second interview, you can tune into our second episode. So enjoy our interview with Wynn Thomas. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our interview with the legendary Wynn Thomas. He's a production designer who's worked on many films, such as Do the Right Thing, Malcolm X, A Beautiful Mind, and our film today, Da Bloods. We're super lucky and excited to talk with him today. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
So we just wanted to start with how you got involved with film.
My beginnings were in the theater as a set designer in the theater, and I got tired of being poor. So I decided to pursue some movie work. And what happened was it took me a long time to kind of break in because a lot of people didn't want to hire me. So the short version of the story is that I volunteered for my very first film, which was The Cotton Club. And the designer decided to take a chance and hire me as a volunteer. And then my first day there, after 4 hours of being there as a volunteer, I ended up getting the very last job in the art department. And I got hired for 2 weeks, and that 2 weeks turned into 6 months. And that's how I got my first film. So I was working for a very famous production designer named Richard Silbert. And the movie was The Cotton Club, and it was being directed by Francis Ford Coppola.
Oh, wow. Working big.
I was building models of all the sets for that film, and I would take them down the hall and give them to Francis, and he would have Francis is always interested in talking to people, and I would have these full-on conversations with Francis Ford Coppola. So that was my first job. And then after that happened, the barriers kind of came down very quickly because I had this very famous designer who would call up the people I was trying to get work with and give me a good recommendation. And the barriers all kind of came down, and my career just blossomed and took off.
So just for our listeners at home, can you describe the textbook definition of what a production designer does on a day-to-day basis?
Well, a production designer is responsible for the look of a movie. We are responsible for providing the sort of conceptual framework in which the movie is going to take place in. And we do that by having conversations with the director and then working with every aspect of the production that's visual, because we're providing the visual framework from which everybody is going to be working in. And I think sometimes the simplest definition that I use is that the production designer is the person who takes the writer's words and turns them into concrete visual images. Nobody else in the film does that. The production designer really is the only person that does that.
So you mentioned using models. Is that your primary form of imagining a scene, or do you sketch, or how else do you put your mind on the page?
Well, I think a production designer has to have a lot of different skills. We have to be able to draw. We have to be able to do technical architectural drawings. We also sometimes need to do physical models. There's something called 3D modeling now, which happens in various computer programming, and I don't quite know how to do that, but all my assistants do. So you have to have a lot of different artistic skills in order to do this job. You have to have a real strong sense of color. You have to have a sense of history, because we are utilizing all of these skills to help tell the story on every film that we do.
So then you said that the production designer is kind of the first person that takes the text and translates it to a visual. So then what communication do you have with a DP or something, or a director of photography or something like that?
Yes, well, clearly it is a collaboration process. I often like to think of the collaboration the process in terms of describing it in visual terms is kind of like a triangle with the director at the top, and then the production designer and the cinematographer occupying the other corners of that triangle. And depending on what the job is and who that cinematographer is, will depend on will define the extent of that collaboration. But generally what happens on most films is that the DP doesn't come on until much later in the process. So very often, many of the decisions or most of the decisions will be made between myself and the director. The locations department becomes a very important part of the process in the very beginning of the film. And I think what people don't realize is that the locations department is part of the art department during the first weeks of pre-production. They work with me to begin to shape the look of the movie. And I don't know how it is on other people's movies, but on my movies, the locations department is talking to me. They don't really talk to the director. I'm the only person talking to director about the visual look of the film, not the locations department.
So you mentioned that an artistic foundation is the backbone of a good production designer. Have you been artistic since you were very young, or was this just something you were thrown into and had to figure out as you went?
I was very lucky. The bug hit me very early as a teenager. I saw a movie called Summer and Smoke, which is based on a Tennessee Williams play, and Lawrence Harvey and Geraldine Page in it. And for some reason, it really spoke to me. It really kind of changed my life. I was all of 13 or 14 when I saw this film. And I what that did was open the door to theater for me, and I became a real theater geek, and um, really kind of just sort of began to live in that world. And I started working. I'm from Philadelphia, and I started working at an amateur theater company in Philadelphia as a teenager, and really worked there really every day of my teenage life from the age of 15 to the age of 18. And this theater company was doing very unusual stuff. They were doing Duramont and Gunter Grass and Bertolt Brecht. And so I spent my time there acting in plays and painting scenery and designing sets and stage managing shows. At the same time, I was a art major in high school. And so when I decided to go to college, I wanted to combine my love of art with my love of theater, and I decided to become a set designer. So I worked, I went to Boston University and studied theater design. And then I came out, and when I came out from school, I worked in the theater for a good solid 10 years before I transferred into movies.
Most recently, of course, we're talking about Da 5 Bloods, and you've had a working relationship with Spike Lee for since his first movie. And so we were wondering what type of relationship you have with really any, well, you've said like the communication line is like a triangle, but like what type of relationship do you have with the director and Spike Lee in specific?
Well, I met Spike early on in my career. I actually met him before he started directing. The quick version of that story is that I was art directing a movie called Beat Street, which was a breakdance film a long time ago. And Spike came in to interview for the assistant to the director job, which is the coffee fetching job. And he stopped by the art department because there was a woman our PA was a woman that he had gone to college with. And when he stopped in, he saw me and he said, "Oh, wow, I didn't even know there were any Black people doing this." And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm doing it." And so as a result of that, we stayed in touch. And then at that point in Spike's career, he was very wise is that he started gathering people as he would meet them. And about a year later, we made a movie called Messenger. We started working on a film called Messenger, which was the story of a bicycle messenger whose mother has, and the bicycle messenger and his family, the mother has died. A year later, the father brings home a woman that he wants to marry. And this script was based on Spike Lee's family. So we started working on this film. We had about 2 weeks prep time. Nobody was getting paid any money. And the film was being produced by a guy who owned a bicycle messenger shop, ironically. Unfortunately, the Friday before we were supposed to start shooting a film, this guy pulls out all his money and the movie collapsed. And we were all devastated, but Spike in particular was really devastated by this. He was very, very disappointed. And the film, unfortunately, was a very big film and had lots of actors in it, and it required a bit of a budget in order to get it made. So we folded. But I think the thing that was significant about that film, which is why I'm telling the story today, is that it really planted the seed in Spike's head that he had to produce his own films. He spent the rest of the year trying to raise money to produce this film, again, which was called Messenger, couldn't raise the money. And then he said, "Well, look, I have this other script. It's a smaller film. It has only 4 actors in it. I'm going to borrow the money from my grandmother, and let's make this movie." And that movie was She's Gotta Have It. She's Gotta Have It was our first film that we did together. The film was produced for $21,000 that he borrowed from his grandmother. And
oh my!
I mean, it's amazing when you look.
It's unheard of.
I mean, for that amount of money, and especially when you look at the film, because the movie looks sensational. Ernest Dickerson was the cinematographer on it, and it was the beginning of that film. Was the beginning of what I call the Spike Lee family, because after the success of that film, the family, which included his cinematographer Ernest Dickerson, Robbie Reed, his casting director, and then Ruth Carter, his costume designer,
and there was a gentleman named Monty Ross who was there. That group went on to produce essentially the next 10 Spike Lee films. And the great thing about my relationship with Spike is that it's been a fantastic artistic collaboration. We have a very strong. I think we have a very similar sensibility when it comes to approaching material, and therefore our collaborations have been easy collaborations, and they've also been, I think the mythology in the business is that the director does everything. And that's a mythology that I really wish that we would get rid of, because it really is a team of people who come together working with the director to service his or her vision. That's what happens. And each person is bringing a different something to the product, to the product. And a good director will surround himself with a team that is supporting his voice. And that's what Spike did in the very beginning years.
I have a question. You explained what the responsibilities of a production designer in pre-production, but what would you say you're doing on set?
Well, we're not really doing very much. We're the advanced team. The art department and the production designer are the advanced team. And in a perfect world, when pre-production is working well, essentially all the decisions are made in pre-production, so that by the time that you're doing a movie, you are essentially shooting and working within the framework and the decisions that have been made in pre-production. That's what happens in a perfect world. So what happens, since the art department is the advanced team, what happens is that I will be there every time we're opening up a new set. And I usually stick around for half a day that first day, just to make sure, just to see how they are establishing the set. So if there are any changes that are being made, I can be there to participate in whatever those changes are, and to be there to advise. Because sometimes, they want to come in, they want to change your furniture, they want to change something. And I want to be there to make sure that I'm protecting the integrity of my set. So usually I'm there for about a half day. I kind of wait till they establish that wide shot. Once they've established that wide shot, that I can see, I could be there to assist if there's any changes that have to be made. And then once that's done, I leave the set and I go on to whatever set we're prepping for the next day's shoot.
So to get more specific about Da 5 Bloods, I really liked the movie a lot, and I thought it was a really beautiful looking movie. And I was wondering how much of the film was shot on location versus what was shot on a set, and how you make those decisions.
Right. Well, 5 Bloods was shot in Thailand, and we also shot in Vietnam as well. So the entire film was essentially built on locations. The company was in a city called Chiang Mai, Thailand, which is about 7 or 8 hours north of Bangkok. And then most of the jungle locations that we found were either on the perimeter of Chiang Mai, because Chiang Mai is a city, or 3 hours away. So there was extensive scouting of jungles throughout the jungles of Thailand. The final set of the film, where the movie takes place, is, as you know, is a ruin. It's based on the Misan ruins, which are in central Vietnam. We could not shoot at the real ruins, obviously, because it's a World Heritage Site. So I had to build my version of the Misan Temple in a jungle from scratch. So everything that you see, all those structures that you see, were built by the Thai art department, but designed by myself, and built by the construction and paint crew and sculptors that were there in Thailand. So those, it's all wood and styrofoam, and beautifully sculpted by the local crews and beautifully painted, and some great work by the local Thai film community.
So, are you mentioned how you design the sets like on a larger scale, like the walls and structures and such, but are you worrying about like individual props as well?
Okay.
Or smaller items like that?
Yes, the production designer is responsible for everything visual that you see in a film. So that means all those departments, everything works under my department, starting with the locations. Obviously, my art director and my set decorator are key members of my team, but everything visual, from props to all the graphics. I work very closely with the costume designer to coordinate how the costumes are going to work within the look of the film. And generally what happens is, again, just so you're clear, the production designer is providing the conceptual framework in which everyone is working in. So it's not, sometimes my process is to actually write down a concept that the director has approved, and I will share that concept with everyone working on the film. And the idea is that every department is working within that framework. But props is part of my department. So I see everything before we show it to Spike. I see everything and approve everything. All the graphics people, graphics designer, all the graphics are all under my department. I am working very closely with the graphics designer, and everything is approved by me before we show it to the director. So everything visual, everything you see before the camera is turned on.
So then a question that brings up for me is, now with films, it's very common for them to incorporate CG elements for like set extensions or just to make things more accurate. And so I'm wondering what kind of communication you have with the VFX team, or is there a standard procedure, or like how do you operate with that?
Again, the relationship with the visual effect team is evolving over the years. But what used to happen, and what still happens on some cases, is that the final image that the visual effects team will be doing will be generated in the art department. That used to happen all the time. We would do those sketches would be done by us. But because that world has taken on its own life, so to speak, visual effects has started to articulate some of the final solutions within its own department. But again, what should be happening again in a perfect world is that the production designer is a large participant in that process and in those decisions.
When you are planning a set design, are you considering like colors and themes, or are you more focused on historical accuracy, especially in reference to this film?
Well, I think we are responsible for all those things. Part of the job in the very beginning of the film for me is to go out and do extensive research. That's how my conversations begin with the director. I take all the research, or much of the research that I have, and my early conversations with the director are to sit down and talk to him, and we both look at all this visual material, because I don't know how you talk about something visual without having visual aids. So my early discussions with the director, for example, on Five Bloods, my early meetings with Spike were sitting down and looking at books from Vietnam or looking from images from Vietnam. And that is really where the conversation begins to occur about the approach that you want to take to the material, okay? Because you're looking at these visual aids, and there's going to be images or photographs that the director is going to respond to. There's going to be stuff that I respond to. And so those early conversations are trying to set up a visual vocabulary to establish a visual vocabulary with the director. That's what we're trying to do. And then again, in terms of, so for me, the next part of my process will be to begin to form a visual vocabulary for the film. And part of that visual vocabulary is to determine the use of color. I mean, color completely falls under our domain. And then I will choose a color palette for the entire film. And again, share that information with everybody who's working on the movie. I share that information with the cinematographer. I share that information with the costume designer. So again, everything visual, again, the production designer should be forming the conceptual approach to the movie. Part of that conceptual approach will be to determine locations and color and textures that you're going to be using. Sharing that information with the entire team, and then everybody should be working within within that framework to make the movie. And by doing that, it pulls the whole movie together as a whole. You're not looking at things that don't seem like they don't fit.
Another question we were going to ask is, obviously this isn't a Marvel movie in terms of scale of production, but it's certainly bigger than the $21,000 you were working with way back when. So does your process change depending upon the budget? And if so, how? And if not, just if you could go into that.
No, my process doesn't change. I did a low-budget movie last year called The Sun Is Also a Star, which is a lovely romantic drama amongst young people. That was a $5 million movie, but the same thought process is still at work. What you have is less money to deal with. So instead of spending money to solve a problem, you solve it by the types of locations that you choose. And in a situation, so you're making your choices are limited on a lower budgeted film, but the thought process and the approach to determining how the movie will look is still the same, whether you have $50,000 or whether or not you have 50 million. On a movie like Five Bloods, for example, I had a little bit more money to spend, so I was able to build that. That ruin is. And you think about that, building ruins from scratch. I mean, it's enormous. It took months and months and months of time to build. But then also some of the locations that we went into needed a great deal of work. In Tien's apartment, for example, we found that apartment, but I had to come in. That apartment, if you remember from the film, is very red, right?
Yeah.
Red. Mm-hmm. And because, again, part of the concept of this movie's about the search for gold and who's going to get the gold, right? If you look at Tien's apartment very carefully the next time you see the film, it's filled with red, but it's also filled with gold because it says something about her character. And if you look at the ceiling, her ceiling is black. So I'm trying to say something about, create a mood about her character through the use of scenery, through the use of production design. Now, this is not something that's going to hit the audience over its head. It's there to guide the audience on a journey. Because Tien's character, we don't quite know who she is. But if you look at the apartment, you can see that she likes gold. The same thing happened in DeRoche's office building, which unfortunately they didn't shoot enough wide stuff of it. But if you look at that very carefully, there's one or two wides in the film. Again, that office is filled with gold details because, again, he's interested in the gold. So there's something about it. So we don't know that the characters are interested in, we don't know about the gold yet, but all these clues as to what's happening are in the background of the story. So it's part of my job is to take this audience on a visual journey and support the story from a subtextual point of view about what the overall theme of the film will be. And so you see that reflected in both those characters. And in both those locations, we had to come in and do extensive work from wallpapering to painting, to, bringing in all the furniture. None of that stuff was there. went into 2 empty environments and fixed them up.
So some of my favorite sets or set pieces from the film were like the river market and also the like the helicopter crash shootout. So is there ever a outdoor location that just like works just right, or was there a lot of work to be done there as well?
Yes, there was a lot of work. The crash site, the helicopter crash site, we see that location twice. In the contemporary scenes, that is that same area, the same that location was 3 hours away from Chiang Mai. Okay, and so in the story, in the contemporary time in the story, that is where the guys find all the gold bars. Okay, but it's also, when we do the flashbacks, it's also where the helicopter crashed and where the plane is. So we shot the contemporary scenes first because I didn't need to change the physicality of the landscape for the early sequences. When we go back to the flashbacks, the art department had to come in and put in thousands of palm trees in that space to make the topography of the space look very different. Okay, so literally, I had villages of we employed people from the local villages to come in and plant all these trees. I mean, it was crazy. It was literally hundreds of people there. And then we also had to build the plane. I mean, the plane, the crashed plane, which is all broken up in pieces, was built from scratch. And then we had a helicopter. Once the helicopter crashes, we had a helicopter that also needed some construction as well. So all of this stuff, which looks organic to the time and the place, is actually scenery that's being built by the art department.
So we just mentioned the helicopter crash, and obviously this movie jumps between 2 timelines. And so we were wondering if for the past sequences are shot in a 4:3 aspect ratio and in 16 millimeters. So there was an obvious attempt made to make a visual difference. So in terms of your production design, were you simply trying to get as period accurate as possible, or were there certain stylistic things that you put in place to kind of make the difference in time period more distinct?
I think those were choices that, to do it in a different aspect ratio was attempt to make it feel closer to footage, our sense memory of footage from the Vietnam War. When you look back at the news footage from that time period, it was in a particular kind of ratio. So the choice was made by Spike and the cinematographer to treat things that way. It did not have my location choices or the choices I had to make didn't change because of the aspect ratio.
And another question is, at least on Defy Bloods, it seems like you prefer shooting on location versus in a studio, like a set. Would you say that's accurate, or is it just how this project ended up working out?
Again, I think it's the choices was to keep it to put it in environments that were organic to the story. I don't think none of us are opposed to building. I mean, again, the ruin's a big set. It's just right. Instead of putting it on a stage, you're building it in the jungle. I mean,
yeah,
So, and again, but the audience doesn't know that, and I think it doesn't look like a piece of scenery. But
I had no clue.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, again, these artists in Thailand are exquisite craftsmen and women. You could literally go up to that set and stand 2 inches from it, and you would have thought that you were looking at stone that had been sculpted and scarved hundreds of years ago. That's how talented they are. So I just think that there wasn't really an opportunity to. There wasn't any reason to build something on a stage.
My question, do you ever make a decision in advance and then you're on set and something isn't clicking and then you have to improvise a solution? Or once you decide on something, do you just have to to hope for the best?
Well, and again, in a perfect world, um, all of the questions should be being asked in pre-production. There's a reason you go on such extensive scouts with the director. Usually you go on your first scout is with the director, and sometimes the DP is on that scout very frequently. So a series of decisions are made and conversations are had. And then you return to all of the locations that you're going to be using with the entire crew, which, as you guys know, is the tech scout. And then all of the decisions and all of the conversations should be happening on that tech scout so that everybody is getting their questions answered weeks before we go there to shoot. That's the whole goal. So, and again, in a perfect world, all of those decisions are made in advance. If you don't do that, the process can become very messy and uncomplicated. I know that it does happen on some movies, but usually what that means is there's something wrong at the top of the food chain. Someone's not doing their work or something's happening, because usually you don't change your mind after going through the process.
We were just wondering how quarantine has, are you still able to do your work, and how has it changed your job description? And yeah, how are you dealing with these new conditions?
Well, I haven't, I'm not working right now. I don't think a lot of people are working. I think the industry is trying to figure out how to come back. And I think it's going to be very complicated. As you know, movie making is a communal experience. And it's very, the idea of trying to social distancing does not work. So I'm not sure how the powers that be are going to solve this issue. It is also unfortunate because part of the joy of the process is to be working with all of these people. I mean, that's the great joy of it. So to put in some sort of restraints that are going to separate people, I'm not particularly looking forward to that. And I don't know how they're going to solve it, frankly. I think we're all going to be signing forms that release the studio of liability issues. That's what I think is going to happen. But it is, there's usually, I know, generally, as you probably know, on a regular sized movie, sometimes the shooting crew is up to 125 people.
Right. How do you social distance?
I don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
You have one actor on the screen and there's 50 people behind them. I don't know, so.
Well, this will end up being our last question, but so I'm a person of color, and you are as well, and like you said, Spike Lee saw you and was like, wow, I didn't know that there were black people working on this. So we were wondering how being a person of color has affected the work that you do in the industry.
Look, I think the world is a complex place, and bias, racial bias is still present in the business. And what's happening now with the current voices that are being heard is that it's drawing attention to this issue in a way that it hasn't been drawn to before. My hope is that there will be some real concrete change because of the sort of heated conversations that are happening today. So that's my hope. As a person of color, I've been doing this for a long time, and I was there by myself for many, many years. And I think the thing that is true and has been true for me over the trajectory of my career is that if you are good at what you're doing, if you have the skill set and you have the tools and you're good at what you do, it's very hard to it's very hard it is your skill set that's going to serve you and is going to break down the barriers that exist. Okay, so which means that over the course of my career, I had to know what I was doing in order to break down the barriers, and because I knew what I was doing, I broke down those barriers. What I just said is going to be true of every job that's available in the movie business. So I think it's very important for whoever you are and whatever you are choosing to do, that you do your best to become good at that particular job. Because the racial barriers or the biases that are going to be there, they're going to be there, and you're going to have to figure out how to get over them. I've had a pretty great career, but I haven't done all the kinds of movies that I would like to do. And I have to know that whenever there was a problem, and it's particularly if there was a racial problem or whatever the problem is, I'm going to look at that situation, identify what the problem is, identify what the barrier is, and I'm going to figure out a way to get over that hurdle, to get beyond that barrier. And that's what I had to do as an individual. And now we, as people, have to try and figure out how to do that as we move forward in our various communities.
If you don't mind my asking, what movies would you like to do?
Well,
moving forward, that you feel like you haven't gotten the opportunity to thus far, just out of curiosity.
Where is my James Bond movie?
Good question.
Where is my 19th century English upper class drama?
Period film.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, this is ridiculous that I am not doing more of those films. I have the skill set. As you can look at the resume, I've done a wide variety of movies, but
For sure.
I haven't done, I keep saying, I read Shakespeare all the time. Why aren't I designing those kinds of movies? You don't, just because you're born white and you're British doesn't mean that you
inherently more talented or
right.
qualified.
Or like Hamlet any more than you do.
That's exactly right. I mean, so it's very interesting what happens here. The example that I give is there was a series a couple years ago on TV, and there's probably a more recent example of this, where it was about John Adams and so and so. And I remember, I think it was Tom Hanks's company that was producing it or something. And I remember having a meeting with an executive about that and about why. And the thing is, this is a story about an American. And they went to England to get the production team. I mean, that's crazy. And that's a bias.
Right.
It's like the white British designer knows more about our history than we do. Of course, that's an absurd thing. It's absurd because that person would have to do. If I had gotten that job, I would still have to do the research. I would still have to do all the reading that was necessary. I would still have to have this exact same process that white British designer brings to the material. And so this is true. And this has been a huge stumbling block for many people of color. We have the business is very comfortable putting the black talent in a black box and saying that they can only do this kind of work. Well, this is a travesty and it's a tragedy. And, I'll give you an example. Ruth Carter was a costume designer, 3-time Academy Award nominee, finally won her award for Black Panther. 90% of the films that she has done have been films about Black folks. She is very capable of doing films. She should be doing Downton Abbey.
Right.
I should be doing Downton Abbey.
It's kind of like getting typecast as an actor.
That's
except
exactly
you're forced into you're kind of forced into making a specific type of movie.
That's right.
Just cause.
Yes, exactly right. So this affects all groups: Asians, American Indians, Native Americans, Latino people. I mean, it's a tragedy. So my hope is that with the conversation that's happening because of the Black Lives Matter movement right now, that some of these biases will be addressed. But addressing these issues is extremely difficult because people cannot see that they have these issues and they're just not aware of them. So,
well, thank you so much. That was a really great in-depth answer. Trent, you got any questions?
I think that just about wraps it up. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate your time.
All right.
So thank you so much for taking the time with us. And that was Wynn Thomas, and you can see his latest movie, Defy Bloods, on Netflix. It released on Netflix last week. Thank you.
All right.
That was a great interview with production designer Wynn Thomas. We thank him again for giving us his time. To hear our next interview with art director Jeremy Woosley turn into next installment of Craft Services, The Five Bloods Part 2.